All right. Good afternoon. Just a couple of programming notes. 11 o'clock tomorrow, briefing by the International Labour Organizations on the release of the new ILO estimates on the financing gaps to meet core commitments for social protection and explore innovative strategies to enhance financing for universal social protection systems. The speakers will include Umberto Cataneo, ILO's public finance economist. Then at noon, after my briefing, we will be joined by our good friends Massimo Torero, the chief economist at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Arif Hussein, the chief economist at the World Food Program. They will be here to brief you on the launch of the global report on food crisis. And then at 3 p.m., as I mentioned, there'll be an open meeting with Sigrid Kaag will brief, and she will speak to you afterwards, probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock, or later. Also want to flag to you that the fourth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop internationally legally binding instruments on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, is taking place this week in Ottawa, in Canada, and is scheduled to go through next Monday. In a tweet, the Secretary General said that every living being and every part of our planet are harmed by plastics and their production. And he said we need a strong plastics treaty that upholds human rights and addresses the full life cycle of plastics. We'll be updating you on the status of the talks later in the week. Just in addition to what Mr. Lazzarini said on Gaza, wanted to tell you that we and our partners are providing nutrition support at nearly 300 sites, including more than 20 health facilities and nearly 240 formal and informal shelters and more than 36 sites in host communities. UNICEF has now expanded outpatient treatment for acutely malnourished children to 95 different sites in Gaza, including 36 in the north and 46 in Rafah. These outpatient therapeutic programs are being supported by more than a dozen humanitarian partners working on nutrition. Meanwhile, WHO reported yesterday that the agency and its partners managed to evacuate 4 patients and their caregivers from Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza over the weekend. That includes a 9-year-old boy. Also, on a social media post, Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, said that the team could only partially complete their mission to that facility and to Al-Auda Hospital due to ongoing hostilities, as well as severe delays at checkpoints. As a result, fuel and medical supplies were unable to reach Kamal Adwan, and partners could not assess the needs of Al-Auda Hospital to support the restoration of services there. Dr. Tedros said that humanitarian aid and missions in Gaza urgently need safe, sustained, and smooth passage across Gaza to serve people in critical need of life-saving care. We continue to contend with major obstacles that are limiting the scale of a humanitarian response in Gaza, including active hostilities, impassable roads, unexploded ordnances, fuel shortage, delays at checkpoints, and Israeli restrictions that prevent us from bringing in items essential for enabling aid deliveries. Also want to flag that Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, today warned against a full-scale Israeli incursion in Rafah. Such an operation, he said, would lead to further breaches of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. This morning in the Security Council, Pramila Patten, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict, presented the 15th annual report of the Secretary General on that topic. She said that the report records close to 3,700 UN-verified cases of conflict-related sexual violence and violence committed last year in 21 situations of concern. This, she adds, reflects a dramatic increase, 50% increase of more verified cases than the previous year. Women and girls accounted for 95% of the verified cases. In about a third of the cases, the victims were children. Moving forward, Ms. Pan said urgent funding is needed for the conflict-related sexual violence multi-partner trust fund. She also called for increased capacity for the work of the Women's Protection Advisors, which she described as a linchpin in her office's operational response. Number of humanitarian updates for you from around the globe. First to South Sudan, where you may have seen news coming out of that country regarding the imposition of taxes on fuel and supply trucks. I can tell you that we acknowledge today's assurance from the government of South Sudan that the imposition of taxes on fuel and supply trucks does not apply to UN's humanitarian development and peacekeeping operations or to the diplomatic community. However, we remain concerned that fuel trucks are still being held up at various depots at the border. Until they are released, we will not be able to conduct many of our activities in support of communities in needs across the country. Our colleagues on the ground report that the situation is now critical, with fuel reserves running out. This will unfortunately prevent the delivery of millions of dollars of aid during a severe humanitarian crisis in South Sudan that we've been telling you about, and it will divert already stretched funding provided by donors and other member states to assist the people in South Sudan. And just to flag an immediate impact, and that is that humanitarian airdrops have already been suspended, impacting 60,000 men, women, and children in need. And our peacekeeping mission, UNMISS, is also forced to review peacekeeping patrols and road repairs and reduce support to peace and electoral process. Nick Haysom, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in the country, said urgent action is needed to get the trucks moving and ensure that support for South Sudan does not grind to a halt. The situation has also impacted our peacekeeping mission in Abyei because their cargo must enter Abyei via South Sudan. And in Somalia, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that seasonal rains, referred to as the GU rains, which come between April and June, are intensifying. There have been flash flooding in Somaliland, in Hirshabelle and southwest states, as well as the Banadir region over the past 5 days, reportedly leading to 4 deaths. We, along with our humanitarian partners, have stepped up response efforts, including by issuing early warning messages, setting up nearly 20 flood task force teams across Somalia, and identifying some 70 evacuation sites in flood-prone areas. More than 50 boats have also been pre-positioned in 10 high-risk locations in the Shabelle, along the Shabelle and Juba rivers. Across Somalia, as many as 770,000 people could be impacted by heavy rains and floods in 22 hotspot districts. The rains are expected to worsen the current outbreak of acute watery diarrhea and cholera. Although the GU rains are expected to further drive up humanitarian needs, funding for the response remains a major challenge. This year's appeal of $1.6 billion is only 10% funded, with $164 million received so far. And in Ethiopia, our OCHA colleagues say that people are being newly forced from their homes in the Amhara region in the north of the country. Since April 13th, armed clashes have displaced more than 50,000 men, women, and children in the North Wello, Waghamra zones, and that's what local authorities are telling our colleagues. Most of these displaced people, the majority of whom are children and women, are seeking refuge with host communities. Others are sheltering in an open area in an industrial site near the town of Kobo and are exposed to the elements during the spring rainy season. The government, along with UN and humanitarian partners, have started providing food and health support. Host communities are also providing water and support. And again, an expression of the low funding, $3.2 billion humanitarian response plan for Ethiopia this year is just 9% funded. And just one more Africa-related note, and that's from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where our peacekeeping mission continues to assist the government's efforts to reintegrate ex-combatants through the Program for Disarmament, Demobilization, Community Reintegration, and Social Reinsertion. Along with partners, the mission has signed a commitment and a roadmap with an armed group, the Union of Congolese Patriotic Defense Forces, otherwise known as UFDPC, which led to the release of 12 children who will now receive support for their reintegration into society. Meanwhile, peacekeepers deployed a patrol to a site for displaced people east of Jugu in Ituri. This happened after they were alerted about the potential risk of an attack from another armed group, the Codeco group. Peacekeepers also conducted patrols with Congolese army to protect civilians on the Drozo-Maze-Lida axis southeast of Jugu, where they observed the presence of armed militias. In Ukraine, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that another attack on Odessa last night injured civilians, including children, and severely damaged homes. That's according to aid workers on the ground. And this afternoon, according to local authorities, several civilians were reportedly injured in an attack in the Dnipro region, just 5 days after the last attack in the area. In Odessa, humanitarian organizations are providing families with emergency assistance, including hot meals, water blankets, towels, hygiene kits, repair materials, and psychological and legal assistance. The attack on Odessa follows strikes on civilian infrastructure in Kharkiv region just a day earlier, which authorities said killed and injured civilians. Homes, a school, agricultural facilities, and other civilian premises were damaged. In Kharkiv, the TV tower was destroyed, partially disrupting telecommunications. And as attacks across Ukraine continue, humanitarian workers are complementing the authorities' efforts to deliver emergency medical services, primarily healthcare, including mental health. WHO has verified nearly 100 attacks on healthcare in Ukraine last year. And in Haiti, our humanitarian colleagues say that the procurement of essential supplies, including food and medicine, is becoming increasingly challenging, with international airport closed, main ports barely functioning, and roads leading out of the capital blocked. Fuel availability has also become a pressing issue, with prices soaring on the black market, and transportation costs also on the rise. And you will have noted that yesterday there was a long briefing on Haiti in the afternoon with Catherine Russell from UNICEF and OCHA and our head of the political mission there. Couple of more notes, if you'll bear with me. Just want to highlight again the plight of men, women, and children on the move looking for a better life. UNHCR said it was concerned about the increasing number of deaths due to migrant crossings, including one that happened today and resulted in the death of at least 5 people, including a child who attempted to cross the English Channel. UNHCR stressed that alternatives must be identified while respecting international law. And our colleagues at IOM said that another tragedy took place off the coast of Djibouti as a boat capsized with 77 migrants on board, including children. IOM says at least 28 people are missing and 16 are confirmed dead. The IOM team in Djibouti is supporting local authorities with a rescue. And the International Organization for Migration said this incident shows the urgent need to strengthen search and rescue capacities, facilitate safe and regular migration routes, and promote evidence-based action to prevent even more deaths. On a related note, today, in a joint statement, the High Commissioners for Human Rights and for Refugees, Mr. Grandi and Turk, sounded the alarm once again on the harmful impact that the newly passed asylum law in the United Kingdom and Rwanda will have on human rights and refugee protection. They are calling on the UK government to reconsider its plan to transfer asylum seekers to Rwanda and to instead take practical measures to address irregular flows of refugees and migrants based on international cooperation and respect for international human rights law. A couple of international days, English and Spanish Language Day. Related to languages, today is also the World Book and Copyright Day. Yeah, there's a day for everything. In her message, Audrey Azoulay, the Director General of UNESCO, said that for books to be able to unleash their full potential, it is essential that they reflect the linguistic diversity of our world, and every written language brings with it a particular worldview with its symbolic values. One more member state, this is a good one. There are only 2 countries in the world that are double landlocked. Yeah, there are 2 of them. One already paid. The second double landlocked country just paid. Double landlocked, just to remind you, in order to, if you're in that country, to reach a coastline, to go to the ocean or to go to the sea, you'll need to pass through at least 2 other countries. No, sir. No, the whole, shui. What? No. What did you say? Yes, Uzbekistan. Yay. Did you say it? Oh, wow. All right, listen, we thank our friends in Tashkent for their full payment. They are number 102. Which was the first, the other landlocked country that's already paid? It's in Europe. No, Bolivia. Liechtenstein, exactly. All right, let's go. Who gets the first question? Okay, Sirife, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. Since I got two right, I hope you can bear with me because I have two interrelated questions. This morning, the UN Human Rights Office said that in the mass graves in Gaza, among the deceased were older people, women, and wounded, while others were found with their hands tied and stripped off their clothes. I know yesterday you said that these sites need to be investigated, but I want to know if there's anything else that the United Nations can do while these crimes continue unabatedly. And I, as a reporter, I know how much the UN is doing to getting a trickle of aid to Gaza. So I understand your efforts, but most of the people around the world don't understand the difference between the United Nations Secretary General's role and the United Nations Security Council. So you can see the frustration, and you can see that people are thinking the United Nations has failed in its response to Gaza. So my second question is, does the Secretary General fear that history may judge the United Nations unkindly, during the time that he's heading the institution?
It's a very deep question, and it is one, I think the issue of when the United Nations is mentioned in the headlines, which UN are you talking about, is an important one to clarify. It is an important one for journalists to clarify. So the responsibility, in a sense, is a shared one. The Secretary General's authority is delineated in the Charter. It's rather limited, as you well know. There are other parts of the UN system, legislative parts, Human Rights Council, Security Council, General Assembly. There are judicial parts, whether it's the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, that all have a role to play. And we hope that people will be judged on what they did within their own authority. I think the Secretary General has been very vocal on what is going on in Gaza. On this particular issue, as I said yesterday, and I think Mr. Turk and his office said basically the same thing, that we need a clear, transparent, and credible investigation. You know what else we need? We, of course, need more humanitarian. We need more journalists to be able to do their work in Gaza safely, to report on the facts. So that's my short answer. One second. That's my answer to you. Before I go to another question, I failed to read a note of the briefing, which refers directly to my boss, so I think I should read it. This afternoon, the Secretary General will speak at the launch of the UN Development Programme's Climate Promise 2025. The event will showcase leadership and collective action to tackle the climate crisis on the road to the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, which is in 2025, already next year, 10 years since Paris. The Secretary General will underscore that in the climate battle, it's not all doom and gloom, as many actors are mobilizing to create a plan aligned with the 1.5-degree limit. He will also encourage countries to make the most of this new initiative and donors to provide it with finance and the needs for maximum impact. And those remarks were shared with you. Abdelhamid.
To my colleague Sharifa's question. I asked you yesterday about these mass graves in 2 hospitals, 2 in the Shifa and 1 in Nasser, and you said it should be investigated. Your statement became viral. It was headline in my newspaper. And they asked me to ask you for more details. What do you mean by investigation? Who will do the investigation? Whom do you trust that will do the investigation?
There are different bodies within the United Nations which would have, could create the mandate and have the authority to create an investigation. I think it's not for anyone to prejudge the results or who would do it. I think it needs to be an investigation where there is access and there is credibility. But I think that can only be judged once something is set up. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. A follow-up question on Madam Colonna's report. The Secretary General said he welcomed it, that all the recommendations should be
Yeah.
be enforced. Does he have any comment on the Israeli reaction calling the report insufficient and making a number of other criticisms?
I think Mr. Lazzarini was very clear when he said that UNRWA is one of the most observed, audited organizations within the UN galaxy. And I think that is very, very true. For the Secretary General, this report was done in an extremely serious, methodical manner. Member states will react how they want to react. We look forward to the reaction of donors, for those who had suspended, and for those who are thinking of giving because they hadn't given before. We hope that this will answer a lot of their questions. The report is a single report in time, but the actions that it calls for are something that will that Mr. Lazzarini will take forward with the Secretary General's support, as Mr. Guterres said in his remarks yesterday. Joseph, Klein, and then Gabriel, and then the rest. I will come back to you. Gabriel.
Thank you, Stéphane. I know you've been asked this before, but I'll ask it again, just if there's any update on the OI, any...
Okay, Joe has like 5 microphones now, so 1 second. Gabriel, go ahead.
Any update on OIOS?
No, none beyond what I've already told you, which that because this was an issue that they raised, that they have been in touch and getting cooperation from their Israeli counterparts.
And has the Secretary General decided yet if he's going to release it publicly? I know they normally are not released.
I think we will. You've asked this question many times, and I've given you this answer many times, so I feel we're on equal footing here. We do hope to have an update with you before the end of the week.
Okay, and just one follow-up on the mass graves. Another day, another mass grave. Sadly, 310 bodies in Khan Yunis. You talked about access and credibility that are needed for an investigation. There's clearly no access. Credibility, that's debatable on who would provide that credibility. Is there worry at this point that this needs to be, these mass graves, plural, need to be investigated, but at some point, it's going to be so far out after that there will be no credibility because it's been so long from now.
I think it's a very valid point that you raise, but I would also point out to example of other conflicts where justice has come. It has come much later, but investigations were done, credible investigations, and there was some accountability. Not enough for those who were probably who were related to the victims and who were the victims, but there was some accountability. Volodymyr, then Michelle.
Thank you, Stéphane.
See, once I move to this side, it'll take me a while to go back, but I'll get back to you, Joe. Go ahead.
During a speech at a Moscow conference on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, Russian Minister Lavrov threatened the 3 Western nuclear powers with the possibility of a direct nuclear clash because of their support for Ukraine. Do you have any concerns about these?
I have not seen the speech. We will take a look at it, but I can tell you that the Secretary General's position on the heightened risk of nuclear conflict and his concern about that remains the same. Michelle, then Joe. Yeah, I told her it's like the ebb and flow.
Sorry, just a quick one on Haiti. I don't think you mentioned this. Yesterday, operations were suspended at the fuel port. Do you have any details on that?
No, I mean, I think that's what Catherine Russell mentioned. It was mentioned. I have no further update for that. But this is, the unpredictability of the operations at the airport and the fuel port, in as much as their closure, is creating quite a lot of damage. Joe. All right, there we go.
That's okay. Let me. All right.
Okay.
All right. I guess I'm not supposed to ask this question. I don't know. But anyway, it really goes to your comment that the Secretary General's authority is limited under the Charter. Just want to probe that a little bit, because isn't it true that he's sort of acting like in the capacity as a chief executive officer? He is implementing many of the Security Council and General Assembly directives and mandates, and he has the authority to bring to the Security Council's attention matters that he considers of grave concern under Article 99. But mainly it's his authority as an executive to implement all of these mandates, and his reports under his auspices, don't they influence the direction that the legislative bodies take?
Well, a couple of points on that. It's not his authority to implement the mandate. It's his responsibility to implement the mandates given to him by the legislative bodies of this organization. I think he, as you said, according to the charter, the Secretary General is a chief chief administrative officer, not the chief executive officer, chief administrative officer, and he has the ability under Article 99 to bring attention to Security Council, which is something he has done in one way or another since he became Secretary General. On your question on his ability to influence, let's say, the Security Council, that's, I think, an academic question, but one could look at the results of the votes in the Security Council on a host of issues that we cover here regularly, of peace and security issues, and the frustration expressed by him or by him through me at the lack of unity in the Council and the lack of ability of the Council to come together may lead you to a conclusion as to the level of his influence on that council. Mr. Vacara, then Mr. Deji, and then...
Yes, same question that they did to Mr. Lazzarini. So what, if the Secretary General has a message for Italy about the funding for UNRWA, and an advice for the students that are being accused of anti-Semitism?
I would give you the same answer sort of on both. On Italy, we hope that the Italian government, like other governments, will take a hard look at the report, and we hope that the funding for UNRWA will resume. On the students, I think Mr. Lazzarini's message of compassion was beautifully worded. I don't think I could say it better. As I've said before, because this question was asked, the Secretary General firmly believes in the rights of people, including students, to demonstrate and express themselves peacefully. And on the issue of hate speech, of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate speech, I think he's also been very clear. Alan, and then Deji. Sorry, I'll get you, Deji. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Alan. I still get to. I have some authority here.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Stéphane, Estonian Interior Minister Lauri Läänemets today threatened that Orthodox monasteries in the country that refuse to leave the subordination of the Russian Orthodox Church may face forced closure by state decision. Any comments from the UN part?
I will check into those reports because I hadn't seen them. Obviously, we do believe in the freedom of religion. Deji, and then we will go home.
I have two questions concerning something on X. Hopefully, it's easy for you to answer. The first one, since we talk about anti-Semitism, yesterday, Secretary General on his account posted something to commemorate the Passover and urge for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages in Gaza. The hottest comment down there saying, and I quote, "You are presiding over the single most anti-Semitic organization on the planet. that has become nothing but a mouthpiece for Hamas. Do you have any reaction?
I would urge you as a journalist to explain to people what the Secretary General's positions are. We have been, if we were to spend time here answering all the comments we find on social media, many of them hateful, we would be here for a long, long time. The Secretary General, I think, has had a message of compassion for all. On the current conflict in Gaza, he has been very clear and very consistent on calling for a ceasefire, on calling for greater humanitarian access, on calling for the freedom of those hostages, Israelis and others, who are being held in conditions that are hard to imagine, for their unconditional and immediate release. And we will not be dragged into color commentary on what is posted on X.
Okay, so the next one. I actually watched this account for quite a while. Every couple of other days, the COGAT will post something like this. They said it's from northern Gaza, a market from northern Gaza. Is that a mockery of what the UN did? Because as far as I know,
I won't.
The UN did not really.
As I said, I won't comment on every post on social media. What I will tell you is that recently Ms. Kag was in Israel. She met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as I told you. And one of the things she did is she told him and showed him with what she saw for herself in terms of this grave, grave humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Thank you all. Hasta mañana.